Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Mortgage Coach Tuesday interview. My name's Dave Savage. Every Tuesday, 9 o'clock, we're here to deliver value. If you haven't already, connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page. So my goal with these calls are to provide great stories, great inspiration from great leaders in our industry. Today, we have two amazing leaders. We've got Mr. Ken Perry, not just one of the iconic leaders in compliance, but one of the few people in compliance that can actually make you laugh while he's talking about compliance. Ken, welcome to the call, my friend.
Thanks, Dave. Good to be on.
Good. Well, Ken is actually in an airport, so he's coming from a large compliance event, and he's in an airport, and he's here to bring some good stuff on TRID, and hopefully he'll make us laugh in the process. You know, good luck on that one, Ken. Our featured guest today is Jay Crowell. I've interviewed Jay a number of times. I've trained Jay's team up in Seattle. He has just an amazing team, and he's an amazing leader. Jay has spoken at Sales Mastery at least one time. Jay, welcome to the call, my friend.
Good morning, Dave. Thank you.
Good. Well, I want to do a couple follow-ups from last week before we get into the meat, but I had asked Jay to take a few pictures and just help bring kind of what is his mortgage experience, his mortgage coach experience to life for everybody, and he just knocked it out of the park. I mean, he sent me a couple pictures that, I mean, these could become like, the mortgage coach commercial. So looking forward to going a little deeper and how you're delivering a borrower experience that helps increase your business for referrals or your realtor referrals. So today, while we are on the heels of TRID's coming out in a few weeks, I want to help everybody on this call get more business from your gosh, I'm having a hard time with realtors today, but I want you to get more business from them because there's going to be more challenges coming. So Jay, I'm going to bring you in about 5 more minutes, and we'll start telling your story. Sound good?
Great.
Cool. So I think it's important that we set the stage as we prepare everybody for TRID. I interviewed Dave Ramsey several weeks ago. This quote has been up every week for several weeks since. Not to mention, almost every other time that I have Steve Harney on, we talk about how important it is to have the heart of a teacher. And I think Jeremy really echoed that last week. We were able to, having that conversation with Jeremy, harvest what I don't want to call them scripts, I want to call them talking points, because we want to arm you with talking points so that when you're talking with realtors, you're talking with families, you're bringing TRID to the market in a way that's valuable. And so this was a great talking point. The CFPB wants to make sure 2007 never happens again, and that when families get into mortgage debt, they understand. They understand their options. I want to do a lot of scripting around TIP because this is a new metric, a new measure that we as an industry need to bring to families in a way that's positive and useful. So this is something that came out of the call. TIP helps make the importance of a mortgage decision even more clear and obvious. So again, just a little talking point. And for all you on this call, if you've got some scripts and some ways that you're, the language you're using to describe the new LE and to turn TRID into a competitive advantage, forward those. Feel free to put them in the GoToMeeting or feel free to email them to me, dave@mortgagecoach.com. Here's another one. TIP helps you see how expensive a mortgage can be and how important the mortgage decision can be to building wealth with real estate. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody who buys a home, yes, they want a home, but they also want to build wealth, and we're the ones that fund that dream. And TIP helps really make the point how expensive that is. And then the last script from the call with Jeremy last week, or the last talking point, was TIP and the total cost over 5 years helps families make an informed decision. So all good stuff. Hey, Jay, anything you want to add before we move on? Just some thoughts you might have and how you're positioning TIP and total cost in the marketplace?
I just think that, my personal opinion is nothing's changed. So this is just new information, and it's just being presented in a more transparent and clear way. And I think, my personal take on TRID from a standpoint of looking at the LE and the CD, I'm grateful for it. This is thankful. I'm thankful that we have a document that goes to the client that makes sense, that's clear, and something that we know that universally in our industry that people are going to get good, clear information that isn't smoke and mirrors, that isn't goofy, and add this box to this box, and it's really straightforward, and that we have a document at the beginning that is going to help them understand what's going to happen at the end. And so, personally, my opinion is I think it's all positive, and there's nothing wrong with giving somebody some time to be able to walk in to their signing empowered and ready to make an informed decision.
Love it. The attitude of a teacher and the attitude of someone who's going to turn some of these changes into something very positive. So Steve Harney said a lot of things that I thought were really powerful, and he echoed how important being an educator is. But some of my favorite takeaways from the conversation with Steve last week were how he talked about visuals, and he talked about how people they learn better, they remember better when it's not just a conversation over the phone or in person, but there's a visual. And so it talked about how people, the human beings, and how we learn. If it's visual, it's 83% more effective. Again, we know this intuitively, but are we always implementing this when we're meeting with families or we're meeting with realtors? He talked about in terms of retaining what people learned. When it's visual, there's 65% chance that they're gonna remember it more 3 days after the presentation. So again, just echoing the importance of don't just tell stories, you've got to tell and show stories at the same time. And everybody at Mortgage Coach, this is what we do. We help you not only tell stories and share strategies, but we help you do it in a more visual way. So everybody on this call, we talk about this every single week. We talk about, fee worksheets, and there's a better way to deliver transactional details to families. And today's call with Jay, and then when we bring Ken in the second half, it's going to talk, and we're going to focus on how to get more business from your realtors coming into this trade market. So Jay, before we get into what I would just call kind of a virtual site visit, and we talk about your borrower conversation, we talk about how you're telling stories and strategies with realtors, I know you were at the experience last week, and I would love to know, what are a couple of your big takeaways from that 2 or 3 day event last week?
Lots of content, great event, really encouraging time for me. I think kind of my big 3 takeaways that I'm working on trying to implement. I've been a part of their coaching group for a long time and been a master's coach, and so it is somewhat of that sharpening, but repeat, going again and again and again, and hearing new things, and also hearing things that I need to keep working on that I've heard before. But some new kind of ahas for me was, so last week, this first day was Wednesday of the event. We got down there on Thursday. On the Monday before was my son's first day of school. And he came home from school, and I got home from work after he'd already been there, pre-K, he's 4. And he's pumped. He's like, Dad, check it out. I learned the Pledge of Allegiance. And he not bangs out. He says the whole thing word for word. But while he's saying it, he originally started with his right hand over his left, chest, and he switched midway through, and I so wanted to correct him. And my wife kind of knew what was going on in my brain, and she kind of like said, gave me the eye of like, shut up. And, I just had to bite my lip, and I don't know what it was about me that wanted to correct him when he was doing a great job and, said it word for word. But I was really challenged, when Bob Goff spoke at the experience about being encouraging, being somebody that provides uplifting words, and whether that's, in my workplace or in my home or just in my community in general. And I was just kind of like reminded of that story with my son. And, thankfully my wife was there. I didn't say anything, and then I did get into a place of encouragement, but wanting to just kind of retrain my mind to be scanning the world for the good things and not the one, negative. The second thing that I kind of took from the event, Dave, was really to focus on refueling. This summer just kind of was taxing. We're doing a remodel on our house. I run like a basketball camp for inner city kids, a high-level elite, program, and we're cranking in our mortgage business, and you got family stuff going on, and just kind of felt like I was, pouring out of my cup and wasn't doing enough to get the cup refilled. And if you want to continue to make an impact and to give, you have to, be refueling with that. And so I was kind of challenged to ways to refuel are really kind of going back to our vision. And I was surprised when I opened up my Evernote and clicked on my business vision when the last time that I actually made an edit to it. And it was like, whoa, I have not seen this enough. And now I wonder why, you end up getting into a position where you're just you're down in the trench, you got you're digging, and you don't have your eyes up on where you need to be going. And I think for me, I want to make sure that I'm not getting through the day or getting through the week, but making each day a push towards my vision, each day a push towards my goals. And if you're not seeing those goals and, realigning and recalibrating yourself to those goals daily, then you kind of can get into the muck and mire, and I think you get drained and you don't have your fuel as much. And then the last one was Daniel kind of had a challenge of making Mondays rock. And I really like that idea of how do I make Mondays awesome.
I love it. I love it. So three big takeaways. Be encouraging. I love a quote you said, always scan the world for the good things and be a person who is inspiring. I think that's awesome. And then what I wrote down, just kind of a personal note to when you talked about refueling yourself, don't let busyness get the better of you. And let's make Mondays rock. So I love it. Great way to kick off the call. Hope everybody got some good reminders from that. So Jay, in order to be someone that actually, because of the way you deliver value to borrowers, the way that you pre-qualify them, the way that you help them understand their options, I want to really drill down on that, but do it in a way that gets to, at the end of the day, we want people to come away from today's conversation and go, I am going to get more referrals from realtors, and I'm going to turn TRID into a competitive advantage with how I do things. So, we have a picture here that you sent me. If you could, one, just kind of walk us through your borrower experience and what we're seeing in these pictures.
Mm-hmm. Typically, borrower experience is going to be introduction phone call, drive to get them to do our pre-qualification form online. After that call, follow up and ask for documentation while setting an appointment. We really drive hard to get a face-to-face like you see here. And in that conversation, we're going to have edge presentation, built ahead of time. If they're renting, we'll definitely use a rent versus own. And depending on their situation, if they're coming into town, they're relocating, then we may show that as well, because they may be kind of in that fence of, do I buy or do I rent if I'm coming into a new city. And then if it's just a move-up buyer, or they know for sure they're going to buy, based off of the conversations we've had, understanding their goals, then we're going to show a total cost analysis. But we want every one of our clients to see this. It's one of our core pillars to be a mortgage planner, not just a loan officer. And so in that, this is a key deliverable that I know that I can, quickly, efficiently go, from, price to advice. And, we want to be competitively priced, but we want to make sure that we provide good value. And so we think this empowers the client to be able to make a good decision, and an empowered decision, and be able to, move beyond just the lowest rate and look at what's my lowest cost of financing, what's my horizon line. And so we start that conversation, and in that, afterwards, I'm going to email them a link to that so they have that. We then will, move from what kind of level of, prep work they want to do. We have an express program, so that's a pre-underwrite, so we can close in, 12, 14 days if we need to, or just get them, buyer ready. So it just kind of depends on where the client's at, where their pulse is. But we want to be able to get to a place where they know firmly that our yes is our yes, and that we're going to be able to deliver that smooth on-time close, because that's a key, component to our process. And then typically what I tell the clients here is that, we may do a series of 2 to 3 edge presentations with the client, Dave. And so we may start high level, like, all right, here's what, so you might have a client, for example, that came into town and they're thinking, hey, I might be able to buy something at 650, and then they go out and they start touring around, and they're like, gosh, in this area we need to buy like 750, maybe even up to 850. So we might build, you know, a 30-year, 15-year, 7-year, 5-year arm, 10-year, 7-year arm, that kind of scenario, and show them, or maybe show 2 30s and 7 and a 5, and have them see that at a 650 price point, pull up another edge presentation for the 750 price point, and another presentation for a 850 price point, so they can kind of see and kind of get the comparison, and then narrow that down. And really, that conversation is helpful because it's not about the price. It's looking at payments and what they can afford and what fits in within their budget. And at that point, you know, people are like, well, what's the rate? Well, this is what the rate is currently, but know that you're not locking in until you're under contract. And then I tell them, typically, you know, we're going to look at another edge presentation once you've found the house, because one house, you know, might need some TLC down the line, and it's going to maybe need a refinance, or it's going to need some cash out, or it's going to need a construction loan. It may need a home equity, and then we're going to refinance that loan. So I explain those kind of components, or maybe that dream house, or maybe the house they want to put more down, or you know what, this is a great house and it's great for us, but we just got married and we know it's not a kid house, so you know, a 7-year arm makes more sense. Or we found a house that we can move into and it works for us now, and it'll be great when we have kids, so let's lock in that low, inexpensive 30-year fix where their current market is. So we know that that conversation is a little bit more global up front, and that we're going to, as we start getting closer to that targeted house, that we're going to laser that, you know, focus in and allow them to kind of see these, and we're going to sharpen this down. So if somebody says, I don't want to see these arm, I don't want to see an arm again, great. We're only going to talk 30. So that's really kind of our process when we look at the mortgage coach experience and really delivering, you know, a planning approach.
So folks, a couple takeaways I hope you get. He is walking people through the options. Now, in this particular case, he's in his office. I'm going to ask you in a minute, Jay, you know, what percentage of your borrowers do you meet in the office? What percentage is over the phone? But I do recommend to everybody on this call, it's important that you get, you know, this experience in the hands of your families and your realtors. So that means it's important that you share the link with them and you get them to download it. So I would urge everybody to build a habit around share the link from your mobile device. So if you're showing it from your iPad, click on the share button and text it to them so that it's from your mobile device to their mobile device. And if they're with you, you really want them walking away from that experience with your mortgage advice in their back pocket. So the sharing experience as we prepare for TRED, someone asked me earlier in the GoToMeeting Q&A, is this about TRED? Well, this first half of the call, it's strategically about TRED. The second half of the call will get a little more tactical, but just make sure you have that sharing experience down. So Jay, before we transition to how you're, what you're doing and how you're educating directly to realtors, let's just go through this really high level, this rent versus own. You're delivering it to people. I don't know if you have a sense of how many people are viewing it on mobile versus desktop, but let's just go through this. And what are we looking at? What are we seeing here?
Well, I think basically, it's a tool that equips the realtor and the buyer to understand the power of the purchase they're making. For example, we had a client 2 weeks ago that got under contract. We've been talking to him for, probably 90 days, and they'd made 3 offers prior, got under contract. Their inspection contingency was expiring on the day that he called me and said, man, this feels like a big deal. My first home purchase, maybe I should just be renting. And I said, okay, and he's like, kind of asking some advice, and obviously, I want him to make his decision because he has to live with that house and he has to live with that payment. But looking at it from a standpoint of equipping him to make an informed decision, I said, well, let's pull up your rent to own versus analysis that we did last week when you selected your mortgage solution. And, this kind of situation, he's got it. And he actually did pull it up on his phone. We're looking at, there's a big difference of over the next 5 years, he's going to pay $121,000 of rent versus, he picked strategy 3, and that was, $50,000 in principal reduction. And so we looked at, from a cost standpoint, yes, you are paying more out of your pocket each month. Because that's his hang-up is like, hey, I could be paying less than I'm paying on my rent. And I'm like, you're right. But when you factor in principal reduction and tax benefit, and you just got a nice raise, that's going to impact your taxes even more. There's a net savings of about $400 a month. So when we looked at that, he's like, okay, great. I feel good about this. I needed this call. And the agent had called me and said, hey, I'm a little bit scared. Hey, I hope you can have a conversation with him to talk him through it. And the agent texted me back and said, hey, man, whatever your conversation you had, that was big. And I forwarded him the spreadsheet. And I said, just so you know, I give this to all your clients. We've talked about this in the past, but just want you to know that this is a process that we go through. And he just, said, wow, this is amazing. It's an awesome report. So when we're talking about TRID, I think the power of, and you talked earlier about, TIP, I think all that data is not new data. It's just presented in a new way and probably in a more transparent way. And I think the thing about it is that still in the LE or in the CD comes out as raw data, whereas when you present that same data, and our company, we have said, hey, this is the Mortgage Coach tool is what we want people using, and this is the only acceptable document that we want clients seeing outside of what's generated by the LE or the CD. So we have full support for you guys at Mortgage Coach, Dave, but I think it's big for them to be able to take that data and understand the power of it and be able to see, well, what is my investment? And yes, it does, like Jeremy said, it is expensive to take on a mortgage, and this is a real debt, and we need to take it serious, and we need to make an informed decision to drive down the cost as well as we can, and that does depend on what mortgage solution and mortgage plan you select. But being able to equip a client with whether it's a total cost analysis or a rent versus own report, it does matter, and it does help them be able to position themselves understanding what they're doing, why they're selecting it, and giving them quantifiable data that you can't argue around. You can't argue the principal reduction. You can't argue what my rent check looks like after 5 years and what equity you don't have and the potential for appreciation and the potential for a tax deduction. So being able to use all that and to drive that, that's a powerful. And I think from an agent perspective, I'd say when I talk to agents about our Mortgage Coach experience and using that as part of our planning approach, the rent to own is the most tangible for them because they see the true power that a client will go, whoa, I'm leaving money on the table by renting, and it pushes people to make a decision.
Love it. So folks, the best practices, and then Jay, let's be ready to share a couple stories of how you're educating realtors with TRID and how you're using Mortgage Coach in that experience. But make sure you're adding that video for every time you create a Mortgage Coach. Graphs, charts on mobile with a video. It's incredibly powerful. And remember Dave Ramsey's advice from a few weeks ago. Make sure that video is less than 2 minutes. According to Dave, make it less than 1 minute and 26 seconds. But net it out for the family. I want to remind everybody we do have scripts. They're actually in the handout section. So in the GoToMeeting, you can download these scripts. And there's a checklist on what is a great Mortgage Coach video. So go read this checklist after you create a video. Both the material and the content. And then we also have an analysis. So we're always looking for different scripts. I'm gonna show some scripts, preparing everybody for TRID from a sales perspective while Jay's talking about his realtor experience. But make sure you're creating those videos. Make sure you're delivering this to every single family so that when you go to the realtor, you really have a value proposition. You can visualize your stories and your strategies. So Jay, why don't you tell us, what are you, from a Mortgage Coach perspective, how are you using Mortgage Coach to get more referrals from realtors? What are the different kinds of conversations that you're having and the different kinds of meetings that you're having right now?
Again, I think when I sit down with an agent. That's part of our process, as we kind of go through our 4 pillars that their clients can expect and that they can expect from us. And one of the 3 pillars is centered around mortgage planning and helping them understand, their clients getting good advice, thorough advice, and a very transparent approach to the financing. So we do show them what, I always bring my phone or typically I like to have my iPad for it because it's larger. So I'll walk them through what a total cost analysis looks like so they can see, the advice that we're bringing and the value. A lot of agents are asking, hey, can you CC me on that, introduction email, including the agent on the total cost analysis email that goes out so they can, have that to talk with the client around that and use that as another tool to be able to kind of look at a follow-up from us to help them understand their goals so they don't put them, they're not out showing houses at 750 that, yeah, they qualify for 750 or even 850, but from a budgeting standpoint, they want to be, under 700. So they have that. So I think there's some meaningful agents that I'm working with that want to not just push the buyer into the highest price point. They want to find the house that meets the client's goals. And obviously payment around that is a crucial component when you factor in budgeting. We are doing a lot of conversation right now around TRID. We are in those conversations. So yesterday presented to about 30 agents about TRID. We have another meeting today with about 25 agents, have one scheduled for next Monday with 40 agents, have had a couple, last month with, large offices and doing, their weekly sales meeting and come in and doing a TRID conversation. Yesterday I had my iPad with me. I pulled up what a rent to own, showed a total cost analysis and a rent to own report, rent versus own, and showed them, the data from the LE and how this translates onto a mortgage coach experience and the importance of being able to get good advice and understanding around the data that's there so the client has, a better perspective around the decisions they're making and do not get caught up in cost, fee, rate, and look at loan strategy, loan program, and their approach. So yeah, I definitely think TRID is an opportunity in the marketplace because I think some companies are going to struggle with it, and some will use it as a competitive advantage, and that's obviously our goal. And but we talk through the different changes that I think really apply to the agent. I think that what I'm telling the agents is because I think there's kind of 4 real key takeaways that realtors need to be doing is, one, the first thing they need to be doing is they need to make sure they get their client really dialed in before the offer. Because deals that you have to restructure midway through or at the last minute, those will not close on time anymore. That the clock changes and the 3 days or the week, depending on how you're getting the client to acknowledge the CD, that's going to cause some material impact. So you need to make sure that client is totally dialed ahead of time, and so you need to be making sure that you're working with a lender that does their diligence and really does a thorough upfront qualification of that client and have really uncovered all the stones. The second thing is the client needs to have their lender selected before the offer is accepted, because the searching and the taking that full 5 days, that's the difference of not closing on time versus closing on time in this environment. The third one is we need the client to hit go and be responsive during the process. So obviously we've gotten all their documentation if they're working with us, and we feel comfortable with issuing a letter, calling the listing agent, saying, hey, we're going to deliver a smooth on-time close. That's part of our practice. But again, they need to be responsive during the transaction. And they need to, hit go, and they need to acknowledge the documentation along the way, whether it's the initial disclosures and getting those back in, and the LE. But if there's a change that happens, or the CD when it goes out, they need to acknowledge that, promptly so that the clocks start. And then I think the last one, which is a conversation I've been having a lot with agents when I do my one-on-ones with them, is talking about closing on time is important. We want to do that, and I don't think the blanket 45 days matters. I mean, I still believe that we can close in 30 days, no problem. I think we can close in under 20 days, depending on the scenario. It's just going to be tied into the situation, and we need to look at it. But with all that said, we have to customize the close date. And I'm talking to agents, don't write up an offer that closes on a Monday, because we basically lose the weekend. It doesn't give us any more time. I'd rather practically just close on a Friday than on a Monday. Let's lose the couple days. Friday's end of the month, last Friday of the month, that's the busiest closing day. The last day of the month is a busy closing day. Let's pick it. Let's close it 3 days early. Instead of a 30-day close, let's have a 27-day close. Let's not be hit with month end. And so those are the things we're talking about, but also the idea of let's write up an offer that's a 30-day close. Yes, we can hit that. Yes, we can hit that with TRID. But we have situations where a client will write up an offer on the 1st of September for a September 30th close, but they negotiate the inspection, and they don't really reach mutual until the 8th. And the 8th, now we're looking at a 3-week close, and that puts a lot of pressure on the system. And with TRID, if that client really hasn't moved into application status and started the process and ordered the appraisal, that timeline isn't going to work, depending on the situation. So really about structuring it as once you reach mutual, you have this many number of days. And so those are conversations that I've been having before TRID, but I think really TRID magnifies the importance of those. And I think the agents have been really responsive to that, and liking the ideas of, oh, that's great. Well, let's close on a Thursday, the last Thursday of the month instead of the last Friday of the month, or let's close. Tuesdays and Wednesdays are maybe better days. They're busy. They're slower days of closings. Let's not get on the freeway at rush hour. So that's. And it's not just us. It's it's the recording office. It's escrow. It's all the people involved in transactions. It's going to be smoother.
I love it. So I've been putting up a number of scripts on the screen. If you want these, they are in the handout section. Jay, in a minute, I want to ask you. You had told me a story about how you were talking to a group of realtors and you used your iPad as a prompt to help share a strategy and tell a story. So I want you to share that in a minute. I'm going to bring Ken Perry in. We're going to have a conversation, and with Ken, we're going to continue with Jay and get a little more tactical around TRID. But I did want everybody to know that if you type in Todd Duncan into your mobile app, all the scripts that I'm showing up, they actually are, they're in audio with Todd. So he's walking you through these, again, between his scripts early on, or his scripts, and then Jeremy's scripts, and then some of the things that we pulled out of the conversation with Jay, from a selling perspective, from a, how do I engage in a conversation with a family in a way that's unique and different and better? Because at the end of the day, what the CFPB wants, they just want families to understand their options, and so we're a piece to that puzzle. Only we do it in a way that's a competitive advantage with realtors. So Jay, really quick before we transition, we bring Ken into the conversation. Tell that story. You were saying how you were speaking to a group of realtors. If you could just give us the setting, tell everybody what you did, because that's an action that I think if more mortgage coaches did that, they would be more successful. They'd get more business from realtors. So if you could just share that story real quick.
Can you say that one more time, Dave? The story specifically we're talking about.
Early on in this call, you were telling me how you pulled out your iPad with a group of realtors, or I don't really know who you were talking to, but you were talking to some realtors to share a strategy or story with your iPad. I don't know where it was or when it was.
Yeah, it was a story about basically, yesterday, for example, I told the story that I told earlier in this call about, that client that's sitting there on the fence, that is kind of going, do I move forward, or do I exercise my, inspection? I'm good with the house, but that's this is my last chance to walk. And I think the agents see the power of how do I keep my client sticky to the transaction and sticky to the deal. And if they feel like they're making a strong financial decision, they're going to be into the deal. They're going to stay with that. And I think having a financial partner, a mortgage planner, that shows the client real reason of why they need to be buying and how the decision is empowering to them, and a positive impact to them. That, like the graph you showed, that rent's $121,000, and to be able to visually see that, the agents were blown away, going, that client was going to spend $121,000 in rent versus the principal reduction of $50,000 over the next 5 years. That's powerful. And to be able to go, the data that's on the new LE can be scary to people, and that when they're looking at, whoa, I think clients could get cautious, and that could be a knee-jerk reaction to go, oh wow, I'm paying almost 70% of my payment is going to be in interest. I don't want to do this. I just should rent. That's a conversation that they were concerned when I said, hey, tell me what you think about this, and what are some reactions that clients could see. And they're saying, well, this is nothing new. This is no new data. But that doesn't, just telling somebody that this isn't new data doesn't speak to their situation. It doesn't speak to go, hey, I want to make sure, this matters to you. Because, it's going to rain and it's going to flood. But until somebody's experienced a flood insurance doesn't really matter. And so in this situation, when somebody looks at payment difference and go, wow, I'm paying $600 more a month, and I'm going to be paying 70% of that payment is going to go to interest, and they can't quantify what that cost is and what that benefit really is to them when you factor in the components of principal reduction, tax benefit, and the potential for appreciation. That's where the data speaks for itself. And so I think the agents really wanted that experience, and they were excited about it. And I had sent out the TCA, and I had like 30 views on it yesterday.
So folks, think about it. You're out, speaking to a group of realtors. You pull out your iPad. In Jay's particular case, it was both a story and a strategy. The strategy was rent versus own. The story was a customer that he helped a few days before that, or a week before that, and he was able to share it. And then you could have said to the realtors, if you'd like me to forward this to you so I could just forward it along, give me your business card. You could have either texted that or emailed that to them. And now you've got all these realtors, they're seeing your story and your strategy. They've got it in the palm of their hand. And now next time that they give you a referral, this is their expectation. Working with you is just better. So, hopefully
I did email it out. I did email it out to all of them, and their office managers send it out and put it in their office meeting notes from the day.
Boom.
The other thing that I talk to agents about that I think is crucial is I tell them that I do get to see when they viewed the report, and how that does create opportunities for more intentional and more practical follow-up. And I think, originally, even when this rolled out, because I was an old Mortgage Coach user, I liked the PDF, and it took me, a little bit to kind of get used to the Edge presentation, which is way better. But for a while, I would send out just the PDF, and then I went to sending the link and the PDF, and it was kind of like, if this doesn't work, then you can send it. And now I only send the link, and that's been, for a while, for over a year. And it's only in the case that a client says, I'm having trouble opening it, and they maybe just kind of challenged, like, can you send it to me in a PDF version? Then I will. But it went to, everybody was getting a PDF, to some of the people were getting the email, to now everyone's getting the link only. And then from a standpoint of the PDF, it's like less than 2% of the clients now need that. And that's part of the reason why, as you saw in the picture, Dave, when I'm sitting there with the client, I'm kind of training them how to use the tool and how to make it more meaningful to them the first time, so that when they go home, they can use it. So I show them, I have my tablet there, I have it on the screen, so I can walk them through. If they look at it, because it's a different experience. If you look at it if somebody looks at it on their PC or on their Mac, it's going to be different than if they look at it on their iPad or a tablet or their iPhone or an Android. that's different. So I show them the two different ways to view it. And every once in a while, a client will be like, hey, can you print this for me right now? And I'm like, I'm going to email you the link. And then if they still want the paper, then I print it for them. But that's, again, that's a minority of maybe 1-2% of the time. And then from a percentage of meeting with the clients face-to-face, you did ask that earlier, that's high. We work really, really hard to get clients in our office or, in a case, meet them somewhere else, but we really try and get them in the office, at least on a first-time experience. So if we've worked with them in the past and, we've done a lot of deals for them, then obviously, meeting face-to-face isn't as important. It's going to be based off of their need and schedule. But if it's a new relationship, we are trying to create a relationship, and that happens face-to-face. And otherwise, then we're going to work really hard to have a meaningful call, maybe use, some platforms like a Skype, and then use, the mortgage coach experience, get them on the phone while they have it up, and also send them one with a video.
Love it. Well, you are rocking it, my friend. I hope everybody has you know what to do, you know how to deliver a better borrower experience, and now you know how to bring that to your realtors in a way that's a competitive advantage. So let's bring Ken Perry into the conversation. Ken is one of the nation's leading compliance trainers and a fantastic friend of Mortgage Coach, and so many of our clients use the Knowledge Coop as a way of not only assigning compliance training, but assigning sales training. So Ken has a pretty good perspective of compliance. What do loan officers need to do to be TRID compliant? And he also knows how to do that in a way that, is a sales advantage. So as everybody knows, we've been interviewing a lot of the top compliance leaders. We have Richard Horn coming back again on the 6th. But Ken, you just listened to this call with Jay, and I mean, he's our people, so I know you're loving it. What advice do you have to Mortgage Coach members, and what do you want to bring into today's call to help everybody become prepared?
Yeah, so can you hear me okay?
We hear you, man.
Excellent. So I'm at the airport. I'm hoping they don't make any announcements or that'll be loud. But, first of all, I've never met Jay, but I want to bring him to D.C. and have him meet with regulators and legislators because they don't think that loan originators are really like that. I just love listening to him because all of Jay's comments are, I really want to take care of the consumer and make sure they have every bit of information to make, not necessarily the decision to get a loan every time, but the decision that's right for them and their scenario. And I think if more people thought that way and if more people use technology like yours, Dave, then you just wouldn't see as many issues as you do, and you wouldn't need the regulations that they've passed. Because regulations aren't passed to try and control stuff like what we're talking about. They're passed because of people who don't do that, and who all they're thinking about is how can I make sure that everybody who comes by my way gets a loan, no matter if they can afford it or not. So let me give you a little bit of just kind of frame this. I'm in D.C. I was at the Regulatory Compliance Conference that MBA puts on in D.C., and it is so interesting to me. I know I keep saying how much I like Jay, but Jay's voice is so calming. I think that's what we all have to be right now. I'm watching your compliance officers, because every big compliance officer is at this conference, and I'm talking to them on breaks, and I'm walking around and watching them, and they're freaking out. And as they go through TRID, and TRID actually, they have like 5 TRID sessions, and one of the TRID sessions run like a half an hour long because they were debating, the panelists were debating each other about the meaning of a term that could change everything. And so you think of being a compliance officer and going to a conference to see people actually not know what to tell you, and we're like 2 weeks away. So they're stressed out, and if you can, as a loan officer, if you could reach out and just be cool to your compliance officer this week and next, that's going to be really good for you. But additionally, last week I spoke in Seattle at an escrow officer conference. It was an annual conference for them, and it's all closers, and they're freaking out like crazy as well. And their biggest thing is loan officers aren't communicating with them, and they just feel like they're all alone and that everything's going to turn on them. I will tell you, if you want to close deals fast and get all the favor in the world from your closers, this is the time. I mean, this is basically campaign. You're running for office this week. This is your time that you need to call your closer and say, what can I do to help you, help me, help each other to make this easier? Because they're freaking out because nobody's telling them what to do. And if you think of it from their perspective, all lenders are doing is saying, hey, we want you to now use our system for closing. And so every escrow officer is learning like 10 systems, and 5 of them aren't even done yet. And so they're betaing things 2 weeks ahead. So you could, I mean, that's how you get more business done during this time, is you just make sure that everybody knows that they are appreciated and that you understand, because you have no idea. I love speaking for escrow officers because they are the ones who take a beating. And if I can bring them some laughter and some fun and some perspective, it just feels really good, because they just get abused. I mean, they're getting abused by borrowers. They're getting yelled at by you guys when the van is in the driveway. And so, not by you guys on this call, but by some loan officers. And so this is the week for you guys to do that with your realtors, with your escrow, your closers. And so that's just kind of making things easier without getting into detail of trade, making things easier on them is going to go a long way for you. And then, of course, with your borrowers, I don't think many of them are freaking out. I think we're freaking out way more than they are. It's a total win as far as the disclosure goes. It's way better than the last RESPA 2010. It's way better than that. It's going to be way easier to understand. They'll pay attention more. They will ask questions on page 3, which is why you need to get out there first and talk to them about it first. When I talked to this escrow group, I was talking about Mortgage Coach, and I was just asking all these escrow officers to give me feedback on what they get from loan officers, and they said, you know, so often loan officers aren't going over those sensitive issues with them. The stuff that you just kind of want to breeze by. Typically, APR is one of those things. You know, there's so many things on current till, and they don't trust you guys to go over this with them in the initial conversation. And that's something that if you're not currently doing an edge report for every one of your loans, you need to kick that up and just start doing that so that you can get to that page 3 before they get to it with an escrow officer or a closer. Because they're going to get to it. It's obvious. Like, there's no hiding that. If they don't get to it in the LE, they'll get to it in the CD, and typically by then they're angry and feel like you cheated them. And it's a great opportunity for you to turn something where you look like the bad guy, turn that into a great planning moment where you're having a great conversation with your borrower, and what are your goals, what do you want to get done, and get that done before they get to closing, because I'm hearing there's just still a lot of people just don't know, you know, what they're getting into. One other thing, and then I'll breathe for a second, Dave, and see if you want to point me in a direction, but get really, really good at that closing disclosure. So I said to make friends with your escrow officer, make sure they know you love them. Part of that is self-serving, because it's time that you are able to explain the closing disclosure, and maybe you guys are already nails at the HUD-1, but you should be studying that closing disclosure. You should be going to your closers and saying, could you please explain to me all of these things, just to make sure you have all the expert knowledge you can get, because in the old days, that closing disclosure is the HUD-1. The HUD-1 actually doesn't go out until they get to closing. Typically, most people don't send it out a day before, because unless it's requested, it's not required. With this new one, when you guys send out that closing disclosure, the first time they see that is going to be, it's going to have your name on the address, return address line, so on the envelope. So they're going to call you instead of waiting till closing and yelling, you know, at them. So obviously you're communicating with them all the way through the process, but get great at communicating that closing disclosure to them, because when they start asking you questions, if you're not ready to answer those, it just punctures your ability to come across as an expert. The best way I recommend doing that, by the way, is after you talk to closers and say, you know, make me an expert on this stuff, then I suggest that you guys all get together in the next 2 weeks in your offices and start hammering each other with questions on it and just role play. We've been doing role playing in our seminars all year when we're doing TRID seminars, and we built it into our CE this year. But we built some role playing in, and it's amazing how much benefit there is to you having a fellow loan officer just stab you on the closing disclosures. Be like, okay, tell me about this, tell me about that, and just, you know, get kind of angry and start dealing with those questions, because better to practice and deal with it there and just get really good at explaining it, because again, it's just the confidence of the consumer. You're the expert. One last thing on that, the CFPB just said that too. CFPB was on a lot of the panels at this conference, and they were talking about, you know, kind of the whole process of borrower conversations and what they would hold a loan officer liable for. And when it comes down to liability, what the CFPB said on this panel was, hey, you're the expert. Like, you, the loan officer, are the expert. So if we're looking at you and going, You know, did you explain everything well? Well, if you didn't, that's potential liability there. If they're hitting everybody with UDAP right now, which is unfair, deceptive, and abusive acts and practices, and if you're not explaining it well, if you're not bringing your best game to the table, if you're not giving them expert advice and really teaching, that could come back on you because it's the expectation the CFPB has. They're saying you shouldn't be talking to borrowers unless you know what you're talking about, and that's totally true. But again, it's just making sure that these new disclosures are, you're just nails on them, that you know everything about them, everything that there is to know as of right now. There's a lot that'll happen in the next 2 weeks. It'll get a little bit more interesting.
So,
Dave, I'm going to breathe. How am I doing?
You're doing great, man. I've been taking some notes. I think the big takeaway for everybody is, you know, it's a huge opportunity to go give love to the people that are going to be supporting you in a different way post-trade. So I loved this idea of going and talking to your closer and anybody that's part of that process. I love the idea of role playing. You know, I talk to a lot of C-suites, and it is amazing how unprepared. Like I no doubt the LOSs are going to work mechanically. As an industry, we have it together, but the conversations and the language, there has not been a lot of role playing, if any. There are not a lot of scripts. I mean, that's why I've taken it upon myself to reach out to the Jeremy Forciers. That's why we're having a call right now with Jay. Very, very tactical. You know, next week I'm going to have a call with Sarah Middleton. It's not going to be tactical. It's going to be an amazing, you know, her story on how she's overcome adversity and has a better attitude. Kind of the how to have a better attitude before we come into TRED. And then, you know, coming into the beginning of next week or the week after TRED, it's going to be tactical again. But, you know, Jay, I'd like to pass it back to you. Anything that you want to say after hearing Ken kind of lay out some ideas? And do you have any questions for Ken? Just, you know, being a great mortgage coach who's really working hard to do this right, to serve families. Any questions you have?
I mean, I think that it's important for people to understand what you said, Ken, was bringing your A game and really bringing value and making sure you explain to people that. I guess my one thought is what can loan officers do to prevent themselves from being in a situation where just the client says, he didn't explain everything to me, and you're kind of like, well, I feel like I did, you know, and I gave him a mortgage coach. We had a conversation about the LE. There was ample, you know, emails that went out and said, hey, give us a call if you have any questions. How do we prevent that kind of thing from happening down the line?
That's a good question. People are gonna, I mean, shoot, there were so many people who complained about their mortgage when they were in foreclosure because it adjusted and said that they didn't want an adjustable. And there's tons of documented proof that they did. They just forgot. And when you're a victim, you stop seeing your role in the role you played in that victimization. So they're gonna think that. The best thing every LO can do, and I can't believe it's not being done more, is document in that conversation log every time you talk to a borrower. The borrower misses, you know, you call the borrower, they don't answer, document that. So left message for borrower or called borrower, texted borrower, whatever you're doing, document all of that, because at the end of the day, if they do say you didn't explain this or whatever, and you've got like 4 lines of documentation on 4 separate dates and a mortgage coach ed report that you can prove they've opened, and, you know, those are the things that you're building as far as your case goes, but just document. And most people won't document a left message. And that's a huge mistake, because when the borrower says, I feel like you're not calling me or whatever, it's so easy, because then it's just data. It's not emotional. It's just data. You just look at your screen and go, actually, I've left 4 messages because I've really been trying to communicate with you on this, and let's move on from that conversation instead of having to then defend yourself back. I'm sure I called you. You know, it's just way easier if you can document everything. So one other thing I didn't mention too is the way that you can make sure that you're saying things right to people. There are still a lot of things that we're not ready for with TRID. There's a lot of questions that are still unanswered. There's a typo that around prepaid taxes being a zero tolerance item. It's a typo. We know it's a typo, but it's still a little bit confusing and scary that still exists. And so what I would do if I were you guys is, especially if your compliance officer is at this conference, the conversation you want to have with them is not, are we ready? Because they will tell you yes. Everybody you talk to at a conference says, yes, they're ready. And then you fire back, oh, really? So you've tested your system, your LOS? They're like, well, we haven't really run a loan through there yet. It's like, oh, my gosh, like that's buggy. So what you want to do is don't ask, are we ready? Go to your compliance officers and your production managers and say, what do we know to be for sure about TRID, and what are the things that we aren't ready for? Because if your company has not taken a stance, and I can't help you with this because this is just area that's still gray, but you're going to have to take a stance. And so that's what you want, is find out what are the areas that we are taking a stance on and what are the areas that we still don't know, so that you guys can be accurate, because you don't want to guess. And this is not, it's not sealed up, it's not black and white, and it's going to get really confusing for people. And so that's the best question you can ask is, what do we not know?
Great. This is good data. Thank you.
And I guess one last thing is check with your wholesalers. That's probably the most shocking and scary thing I pulled out of this conference, is that wholesalers are not ready. I talked to one wholesaler that she actually said that their plan was to take the broker's LE and then just send out their own, using their own information, their own numbers that would be different than the broker's. And we're 2 weeks from rolling this, and they were about to do it wrong. The LE goes out based on 3 days from when the broker took the application, not when the lender collected or accepted it. And the lender can't change the LE from what the broker did outside of a changed circumstance or act of God, so or some other areas. But so the wholesalers, if you guys can get with your investors, get with your if you're brokering, get with your wholesalers. If you're banking, get with your investors, because they still don't know what they're going to do, and you've got to start saying you need answers. I mean, somebody at your company at a level who can do this needs to start saying to investors, it's not okay that we don't have answers yet, and you've just got to make a decision on this and start working towards some solutions, because otherwise October 3rd is going to be a lot more chaotic if we don't get answers from those guys. And frankly, the investors are still having to get answers from their investors. I mean, everybody's got to go up a rung, and when the top hasn't made any decisions, everybody down that ladder is going to be confused.
Beautiful. So by the way, for the person that asked, a couple of people asked for a sample of this deck. I will put a link to it where the recording of this call is in the notes of GoToMeeting. We will have a link to this PowerPoint, and my team might actually get it uploaded into the GoToMeeting handouts before the call's up. We are kind of in wrap-up mode. We've only got a few more minutes. Do want to remind everybody that every Wednesday we are now focusing on, we're calling it Mortgage Coach Mobile. So every Wednesday is Mobile Wednesday at Mortgage Coach, 11 o'clock Pacific. We'll show you how to have a mobile conversation, how to share the file. We'll show you how to create videos on your mobile device. If everybody on this call hasn't created a video from your mobile device and added it to a TCA, make sure you do that, and make sure you come to our Mobile Wednesday course tomorrow, and we'll teach you a number of things that will help you be more successful. But I also had someone reach out and say, hey, can I get some one-on-one coaching? I want to remind everybody we've got a Mondays for beginners, and that's recorded too. So not only can you come to that course live and ask questions, but we have recordings of it. So, email us at support@mortgagecoach, and we'll be happy to help you in as many ways as we can. So guys, with we've got a couple minutes left. If each one of you could provide, 1 minute of just, a takeaway for everybody or some advice, Jay, why don't you go first? Any last thoughts or recommendations for everybody on this call today?
I guess my only advice is that, in my opinion, ancient scripture says there's nothing new under the sun. And Travis Bradbury, who wrote Emotional Intelligence 2.0, kind of says it really well. The best way to stand out from everyone else is to outwork them and create a tendency to over-deliver even when we overpromise. And so, to me, when it comes to TRID, and when it comes to driving your business, obviously, the mortgage coach experience is technology that is new and really valuable. But from a standpoint of getting out, meeting with people, creating a relationship, working your tail off every day, and pushing towards your goals, pushing towards your vision, that's my advice.
Love it, man. You can't go wrong with that. Ken Perry, as we wrap it up, what is some
I was
of your...
hoping you'd ask me. I'll give you one tip. It's huge. I imagine a lot of you are like me in that you just kind of go, go, go and build, build, build and work, work, work. And I never look back at my life or my work enough and say, this is good. I've done a good job. I always look at what I'm not doing right. What I'd love for everybody on this call to do is take some time, get to a quiet place this week, wherever your happy place is, go there and sit back and think about all the horrible things that you've been through in this industry. You went through the biggest recession we've had, in forever. You went through a ton of regulatory changes, and when you start looking at the things you've accomplished and you're still here, TRID is nothing for you. But get centered on that and just kind of get to where you can appreciate the things you've already been through, because I think we're just not focusing enough on what we've come through. We're always just wondering what's going to beat us up. Right after you've done that, then go back to thinking about what's going to beat you up. But first, just take a moment and appreciate the work that you've done, because you should be very proud of how you've handled the last few years.
Love it. Awesome advice from two amazing people. Guys, really appreciate the time that you took to deliver leadership to the mortgage coach community. Hope this was a valuable hour for everybody on this call. And if you could, before you leave, I'm going to push a poll. If you are a guest on this call, let us know if you want to learn some more. But let us know what you thought of today's call as you wrap it up on a scale of good to great. Did we wow you with value? Was it good, solid takeaways? And again, if you're a guest and you want to get a demo on Mortgage Coach, join us. Do want to remind everybody, next week's call, it's not going to be a tactical trade call. It's going to be a very emotional story with Sarah Middleton, one of the great leaders in our industry, someone that I've known for over 20 years. I do believe it's her story of overcoming adversity, her story of how she gets to a place of, if anybody's ever met Sarah, this woman's fired up, always brings her A game, and I think it's a great end of month call, so join us for that. And then we are going to start, October, with just getting really tactical around TRID. So from Mortgage Coach, have an awesome week, and look forward to seeing everybody soon at Sales Mastery. Take care.